Good evening and welcome to the Halcyon Weekly Show. Oh my days, how I didn't, just to clear everything one in very quickly, I didn't anticipate actually making a weekly show until next week. I've got a whole new format planned and it's going to be brilliant and amazing. However, due to circumstances that have come to light on Twitter that I made the mistake of voicing an opinion on, I have to put this on a video rather than to try and debate this like a reasonable adult individual on Twitter. Apparently, that's not the place for subtle, nuanced conversation or debate. So, I've gone to the trouble of preparing a freaking statement, going through the whole situation and trying to put it into the easiest terms that I can as to why I think that this situation is way out of proportion, and also, more to the point, completely misses a more pressing issue considering the abilities we have with social media these days. So let's just get it out of the way first and foremost. I'm just logging in here so I can have access to everything. I've literally just finished work, but I can't help myself anymore. I love debating people. It's one of the things that gets me going during a day, finding someone with an opinion that contradicts mine or maybe invalidates mine, debating them, hashing it out, meeting a mutual conclusion where maybe we both compromise to a certain degree, that we both have values and opinions that are worth listening to. However, Twitter isn't about that. Twitter is about having your opinion validated within echo chambers that only serve to reinforce and distinguish your opinions from those that differ directly from yours. So there's no subtlety, there's no nuance, there's no ability to compromise, there's no ability to back down, because once you do, it's documented. It's there forever and ever. Twitter is the bane of progression within society, and I'm going to highlight that with a situation that occurred yesterday. For those of you not in the know, on YouTube, there's a YouTube channel called What Culture, and this is split up into certain subsections that deal with different aspects of culture in general. So gaming, current day events, wrestling and sports now to an extent. Now recently it was announced that there was a departure of many characters and talents within that channel. The most prominent of which it could be argued is a gentleman by the name of Adam Blampied. He is an individual that has served as an inspiration to the kind of content that I produce, based on his wit, his banter, his ability to make me laugh, and his ability to analyse things to an almost hilarious degree. I'm even subscribed to the channel that he had prior to What Culture, the posh man who talks wrestling or something to that degree. Now, recently, with this hop, there's been a lot of speculation as to what's caused that. What's been the reason for him to want to hop channels? Well, we've gotten maybe a snippet of what the reason is. In essence, he's released a statement, and the circumstances, and I've broken it down point by point here. Adam Blampied, he, according to Twitter and according to various sources, and people have corroborated this with pictures and things of that nature, he solicited fans for images and sexual favours, utilising his fame and position in which to do so, which he in turn used as a way of also emotionally abusing the people that he was soliciting. Not only, of course, to for his own sexual desires and fantasies, but also to heighten his ego. He was in a relationship at the time which he described as being open, but wasn't. And according to multiple sources, his girlfriend had no knowledge of the situation, and so basically he was cheating on her. Which, again, I'm not here to debate or argue. That's not right. If you're in a relationship with someone, you tell them you love them. You meant to uphold the sanctity of that relationship. You stand by them, or you man up and you tell them you're not happy in the relationship and you get out there. No two ways about that. Now, the response to this, the response from Adam Blampied was he released a statement yesterday evening highlighting the issues, basically going into some detail as to what he would be doing going forward as a result of those issues, admitting guilt, apologising for his behaviour, and promising to seek help to curb his tendencies. Now, I don't know the full extent of this because the story is still evolving, and anyone that says they know the full extent is talking out of their arse. And I'm trying not to swear here because I don't want to have to edit the bleeps out, but they're talking out of their arse because no one knows the full extent of the situation. It only broke, and those who are in the know, so to speak, are talking rubbish as well because no one knew about this. There were no murmurings, no nothing, no nada prior to this. Now suddenly, of course, people come out of the woodwork and say, of course they knew about it. It's a well-known secret. Nah, rubbish. And unfortunately, the situation is not helped by the fact that this is coincidental with a whole wide array of other sexual deviants that seem to be coming out of the woodwork at the moment. President Bush Sr. yesterday, Harvey Weinstein, a number of others who are interwoven in this situation, which I am not here to debate. It is wrong, it is completely admonishable, despicable and disgusting. Not here to debate any of those points. What my argument though is that people are missing a wider point when it comes to the way that they expend their energies, times and their opinions when it comes to resolving these matters. So to come on to my next point, we're going to talk about the reaction to that situation, which I think is a perfect example, a petri dish of how any massive issue is perpetuated and ultimately not resolved. The issue, the reaction. There have been numerous tweets and statements as a result of varying degrees of outrage at the admission, from the really rather annoyed to the Mount Vesuvius of rage, to the understanding and support of the decision while also admonishing his actions, which I totally agree with. I'm in that camp. I don't support anything what he does and I don't excuse anything that he did. But I also reserve the right to forgive a man for making a mistake when I'm not in a position that he was in. And I can't put my hand on my heart and say, I wouldn't do the same thing if I was put in a similar position, because money and fame do weird things to people. Weird things. Inexcusable things. Which, to be honest, it's one of those things that you can't debate, because unless you're in that position, you can't really understand what was going through someone's head. Now, we move on to the next point. Now, while most would agree that his actions are not becoming of someone in his position, many on the side of the outrage are setting their sights on him as an example of someone who abused a degree of power which is debatable at best, considering he's a YouTube personality most well known for wrestling videos. Do you have any idea the niche audience that you're talking about there? Talking about a percentage, if that. And even then, a YouTube personality, how much power do they truly wield in terms of influencing other people? Now, I get that. Younger people are always going to be more susceptible, and that's really what we're talking about here with this situation. It was a succession of younger girls that he coerced. Some would say pressured into sending him pictures or in compromising positions, which again, I'm not debating. Of course that's wrong. It's why I don't do it. Because I believe truly in my heart of hearts that if you agree that women are equal to men, you should speak to them, address them, and carry yourself as you would expect them to speak and deal with you with. If I expect a woman to speak to me with a modicum of respect, how can I ever expect that if I don't extend them the same courtesy? That's not up for debate here. And I don't want to hear anything from the side that are trying to sweep this under the carpet by saying, oh, it's a thing, it's just drunk. No. You're unfortunately not on the side I'm on at this point. But moving on. Most would agree it's at least an abuse of trust and an exploitation of his fame to curry favour with people who are impressionable and susceptible to that kind of act. Meanwhile, others, as I've just referenced, are trying to minimise the admission, comparing the acts committed, that's supposed to say, to those far worse individuals and situations, including myself, it's worth adding. My first tweet, I think, was something along the lines of, well, if the President of the United States can get into office having pulled that kind of shit, I think we can forgive Adam Blampied for this. Now, in retrospect, I kind of regret that tweet, because comparing one to the other, I think it's a term, redictio ad absurdum. You can't extend someone's argument to ridiculous proportions and then criticise that result. I'm quoting verbatim from Sheldon from Big Bang Theory here. But the logic stands. Taking someone's argument and not the facts of the situation and extending it to ridiculous proportions only serves to perpetuate your own narrative, not actually getting to the root of the problem or exposing a logical fallacy. This is something that keeps being thrown in people's faces. If you make an argument and someone says, well, what if this happens? Or what if he'd said this? Or what if it had been this? But it wasn't. It wasn't. Those aren't the facts of the situation. And simply taking those facts, changing them out to fit a narrative that then perpetuates your own logic is insane. It doesn't work, and it doesn't resolve any of the problems that started this. So coming back to my statement, however, After having some time to reflect on the situation, the facts, and the reaction to all of this, as well as taking into account the tweets that he himself posted today as a result of the backlash that occurred, and the fact that he's having to almost clarify his position, having already released a lengthy statement on this, in terms of its interpretation, what his intent was, how he doesn't want it to be interpreted, what he wants fans and people to do in terms of not attacking women and not attacking people that are not defending him to a certain extent. Now again, I want this to be crystal clear. I'm not attacking feminists, I'm not attacking people who hold a certain belief system, I'm not attacking any, and I'm not defending his position. What I'm doing here is highlighting a wider problem whenever this kind of situation or something similarly morally ambiguous or incendiary happens. The fact that we spend more time debating and arguing the merits of the specific situation rather than combining our efforts as a people to understanding the problem, agreeing on what the problem is, and then proffering a solution that prevents it from coming again. Not punishing whatever's happened now, or looking to retroactively shame and ban people in the future, because what does that do? What does that serve as a result of trying to negate that problem going forward? It doesn't. It never has. It never will. You want a prime example of that? You look at the death penalty. If you tell someone you do this, we will put you to death, it never stopped people from committing such acts. Why? Because it never could. Prevention of the root cause of the problem is the only way to push things forward. Now, coming back to my statement, should calm down a little bit here. I'm already 11 minutes in. I just need to calm myself just a bit. So, however, I have a slightly different perspective to put forward, which I've just highlighted on, but I'll try and put in more cognizant terms now. The fact that both sides are attempting to utilise Blampied to further a narrative or agenda of their own without proffering any kind of solution to the root cause of the issue is systemic of any morally outrageous incident or act that's come into pass since time immemorial. Too often the situation is blown to insane proportions without any consideration or respect for the wider implications of not acting to resolve the problem, instead taking the opportunity to morally reinforce your respective position. Take, for example, my tweets in discussing some of these cases, arguing with two individuals specifically. I won't mention their names here because, again, I don't want to get into that. If you want to see my arguments and debates, my Twitter page is completely open. You're more than welcome to peruse this for yourselves. But take these two individuals in particular who hold the ardent belief that what culture, Cultaholic, and Blampied himself are the perpetuators of a culture of sexism and misogyny, and fosters of the belief that his actions are perfectly acceptable. They both seem active in advocating women take a more active role in empowering themselves and battling against actions of men that they deem to be unacceptable. Now, I don't hold any objection to their positions, morally speaking. To again, kind of not make this about, well, as the son of a woman, as the daughter of a man, and da-da-da-da-da. My position as a man has no bearing on my moral position. The fact that I have a mother who I consider to be my personal hero and the person with which I model my moral and a political compass on makes no difference to the fact that she's a woman. The way that she's perpetuated her life and carries herself morally and politically is what I navigate towards. The fact that my dad is a different moral compass individual also holds no bearing, because the fact that he's a man, it's the fact that I don't agree with his moral standing in the way that you should address certain things. So the fact that I'm a man doesn't discount me from this argument. As a matter of fact, the fact that you even bring that up only serves to undermine your own arguments when you're debating this particular point, but that's not the point I'm trying to raise here. That's a discussion for another time. Now, I take issue with is the hypocrisy being exercised when voicing these kinds of opinions on these situations. The tweets are overtly aggressive, they're inflammatory, provocative to a certain degree, and at no point indicate or highlight what is a solution to the underlying problem, which ultimately is the assumption by some men that it's acceptable to treat women as objects, either in the pursuit of them sexually or belittling their stature and importance in culture as a whole. Now, I, for one, believe that culture is richer, deeper, more interesting, better, more well-founded, more well-reinforced, and has a better chance of progressing the more diverse we are. And I'm not talking about just women, I'm talking about any ethnicity, I'm talking about any walk of life, I'm talking about anything that distinguishes you as an individual that adds to the collective is a benefit to the collective. I am not an individual that holds one group or one creed or one gender or anything above anyone else, because you have to judge, like I constantly say on my podcast, unlike the people that want to smear me with the same brush as some other people on Twitter to say that I'm part of the problem or that quote unquote I'm as useful as nipples on a fish, which I don't understand. But I'm pretty sure if I was to Google good comebacks, that would probably be one of the first solutions to come up. So again, childish argument aside, the fact that I don't hold any particular party above my own is what the foundation of this video is, this argument that I'm trying to put forward. And that is that this has got ultimately very little to do with sexual exploitation, abusiveness, or anything of that nature. This is about a wider argument that I'm trying to highlight by observing the rage that is evident on Twitter at this, and indeed the reluctance of some to even admit there's a problem on one side. I'm talking about both here, but the problem is one side is lethargic and uninterested to debate, while the other seems way more interested in trying to highlight the problems but not solutions, and instead seeks to just attack people, me included. I've been insulted not once or 3 times, but more like 4 or 5 times by people who I've simply addressed and said, look, being angry doesn't solve anything. What does personally attacking this man have to stand to gain for the problems that we all agree have? Rather, it seeks to elevate your status as some kind of keyboard warrior or social justice warrior or something to that effect. You only stand to benefit by perpetuating your narrative, but not by solving the problem. Now, I will highlight one point. One of the individuals that I've been debating on there mentioned the fact that she runs some kind of initiative that helps support women. And to be honest, again, I don't take a moral standing at that. And I don't know if anything that I said or tweeted insinuated that. And if it did, then that's a blatant misconstruction of what I was trying to say. My point stands. Prevention trumps a solution to a symptom. And at the moment, the rage that is exhibited on Twitter serves to benefit precisely no one except for the person ranting and raving. Now, to move back to my statement for a second, the reason I highlight this is as hypocritical as simple. In highlighting the fact that they are on the wrong end of a sea of abuse and unwanted aggression, they have utilised similar tactics when debating me. At no stage have they intended to engage me to debate the problem. Instead, they seek to draw battle lines and paint the situation to be black and white. You're either a sexist or you aren't. You're either with us or you're against us. And to be perfectly frank, it's much more complex than that. It's a much more nuanced argument that again comes back to the same thing. Unless you can agree on what the actual problem is, how can you ever agree what the solution and prevention should be? Now, at no point have I indicated that Blampied's actions are somehow excusable or acceptable, and to be frank, we don't know the full extent of the situation, as I mentioned before. We only know that at worst, what he did was morally bankrupt, but ultimately not illegal, and certainly not something that women could not be capable of as well. And I speak as an individual that has been the subject of some fairly severe emotional abuse from previous partners. That's not to go into the situation there, but ultimately it's not something that only a man can be guilty of perpetuating, and that I think is an argument again for another day, but it's in the interest of balance, not trying to pin the argument on one gender or another, because again, I believe everyone is equal opportunists when it comes to offending someone else. Anyway, back to here. So the context of the situation has to be taken into account, and resorting to straw man arguments doesn't move the debate forward, neither does belittling people who seek to debate the solution, not the moral merits of the situation. I don't care about a particular situation or set of circumstances more often than not. Yes, it's regrettable, and yes, this individual, if he's done something inherently wrong, needs to suffer some kind of punishment. But social outrage and the waste of energy is what makes me depressed, because there's so much better that could be done with that. So let me move on again, rather, because I've already been going for 19 minutes. So where do we go from here? And what's the wider point that I wish to make? Well, I've already alluded to it on a couple of occasions. As far as Blampied himself is concerned, he's publicly shamed himself now and can only work to repair his reputation in the eyes of the fans he's let down. And I'm sure that there are going to be those on both sides, those who will forgive him instantly and those who will never let him forget his actions. And to my mind, they're both wrong. You can't instantly forgive the actions from someone whose actions were at best those of a man who abused his position. There's no question about that. But those who will never forgive him need to look at themselves and understand that without the benefit of context or hindsight, they can't pass judgment. And me, if I'm gonna comment on this situation, I enjoy Adam Blampied's content. Like I said, I enjoyed his original content before he was even on What Culture. I loved his content on What Culture, and I will probably check out his content going forward, especially in light of the statement that he's made and the full extent of the context of the circumstances with which I'm now aware, having researched it. However, the broader point remains. If it's equal rights, battling against oppression, racism, sexism, misogyny, debating gun rights, or whatever the divisive subject of the day is, the only way to move forward as a culture is to stop wasting time debating the individual circumstances of the events and the moral high ground that you seek to attain by doing so. The reason for this is because if there really is a problem, the law is there to protect people and serves to ensure that if someone does outside of the law, they receive their due punishment. And that's the point here. Words that are being used like predator, sexual deviant, assault, and things of that nature all imply a legal barrier which hasn't been crossed here. Unfortunately, the circumstances of this individual are, again, at best, an individual that crossed a line. At worst, an individual who calculated and maneuvered himself in such a way to utilize his fame to exploit people. And I'm not here to defend either one of those arguments. What I am here to say, though, is that by debating it in of itself, this particular set of circumstances, you are missing an opportunity to mobilize and utilize that energy to solve the wider problem of misogyny and sexism, because we all agree it exists. I've been the subject of it. From a male perspective, it never gets talked about, but sexism against men exists, not to the same extent. Meanwhile, sexism against women completely exists, and it's completely deplorable. There have been situations where I've been at work and told I have to do a specific task or job because I would be better suited to it as a man. And I took issue with that. And I say, well, how can that be possible? And it's always the same. When you're dealing with someone who is sexist or misogynistic, how do you change that person? And the simple and frank answer is you cannot. You cannot change someone's personal beliefs no sooner than I can change the beliefs of the people that I've been seeking to debate on Twitter. They are ardent and they are completely convinced of their beliefs to a ridiculous degree, to the point where no reasonable logic or course of action or point of debate will ever get them to assuage or change or go against what they believe. And that's sad, because as a reasonable individual, I'm willing to change my arguments based on new pieces of information. Hence why at the beginning of this piece, when I thought about doing a video about this, I was going to probably go on the side of maybe defending him to an extent without realising the full extent of the circumstances. Having done that, I'm not going to seek to defend him. And more to the point, he's asked not to. However, what I will stress is that we are dangerously close to mob mentality when it comes to situations like this. And the mob is... Just because an opinion is popular doesn't make it right. Just because an opinion is easier to sit on the fence about doesn't make it okay to not voice an opinion about. The fact that I've had to raise this in the face of this, and I've been called names, and I've had my arguments dismissed, because the nuance of the argument is lost on the people I'm trying to put it across to. And these, sadly, are the people with the greatest reach, the greatest voice, the people that can reach the most people. And that is frankly sad, because these are the people that hold the key to ultimately attaining what it is they say they're after, which is social peace and harmony. An idealistic society where no one holds a grudge against someone else because of something that they were born into. I can't help the fact that I was born a guy. I can't help the fact that I wasn't born a woman. So the fact of that shouldn't exonerate me or excuse me from anything, and it certainly shouldn't exclude me from anything, no more than it should exclude a woman from the exact same thing. And that's the point. That's the debate we should be having. How do we solve that problem? How do we understand the full extent of it and prevent it going forward? How do we reach the people that can be reached at this point? The people that hold these beliefs will never change their beliefs, and I'm sorry to have to break this to the people who are naive enough to think that you can, but the reason why religious zealots exist and the reason why war exists is that same reason. So, to try and draw this to a close now, if we really seek to better ourselves as human beings and make the society we live in better for the generations to come, we have to be better than the slights we suffer. We have to rise above the natural disposition of anger and hate and instead focus our energies on identifying causation and prevention of these issues we suffer with. And on a personal note, anyone that I've interacted with throughout this whole debacle, I want to stress my feelings on the matter itself in reaction to the... So that's done. To close this video, I never sought to antagonize anyone on Twitter. I never sought to take a side with regards to the sexism or non-sexism. I'm simply saying that the people who are debating this particular set of circumstances could be serving society and the world better by taking that anger and that disgruntled nature and trying to find a solution to the problem, and then utilising that template to go forward, to get gun control under wraps in America, to get gay rights for everybody, for sexual rights for everybody. Do what you want. Rights and creed and orientation should not matter anymore. We should all be in the same position and we should all be listened to and taken into account equally, but we all have to be educated and open enough to have this debate. So please, I implore you, I beg of you, people of Twitter, people of Facebook, people of the social media, people of the world, stop with the individual arguments and look at the wider picture. Understand and agree on a solution, or rather understand and agree to what the problem is to begin with, rather than wasting your energies reinforcing your moral high ground on a position. That's been the episode of Halcyon Weekly Show. I've been your host, Lorne Riseley. I'm now losing my voice and my battery is about to die. So thank you very much for watching this episode. I hope I reached some of you. Please take care of yourselves, and the next time you decide to get invested in a Twitter rant, just think about the wider implications of the argument and maybe lend your voice to that rather than who you think is right and who you think is wrong. We're all people and we're all on the same team. If you really think about it, that's the truth of the matter. We're all against the inevitable pass of time and the inevitable march of death. So we might as well try and make it more palatable while we're here. Once again, take care of yourselves. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.
That it all ended upside down. Known for being optimistic, started feeling different. Couldn't fix it, started writing lyrics all because nobody tried to hear it. Around the same time, hooked to the nicotine. Music and the smoke were synonymous to me, it seemed. Paid prices through the vices, both sides. Obsessed with a vision, I knew I could make mine. I knew it would take time, I knew they would outshine. Thought it was just